For years now, when I've prepared a couple in premarital counseling, there are a series of things I ask them to do. Little bits and pieces, things to try at home. And after the first meeting, I always ask them to do this one thing. I ask them, and you'd swear that I was asking them to run a Fortune 500 company or jump off a bridge. Pray together. And I said to them, as you see the look of panic in their eyes, I say, it's all right. It's going to be exquisitely awkward at first. As you sit there and just the two of you in an intimate setting and start to pray. And I'm not talking turning to page 500 and reading the prayer there. I'm actually saying, pray. It's going to be awkward, let it be awkward. You might giggle, that's fine, it might feel silly, but you'll get through it. And the more you do it, the more natural it will feel. You see, for a lot of people, prayer is something that we see as so private, intimate. So we feel awkward and exposed before another person, particularly someone who knows you pretty well. So try that with a spouse, a family member, close friend. Try praying together. Tell me if it's not awkward. And if it's not, great. But if it is, do it again and see if it gets a little less awkward. So I usually follow this up by wondering out loud with the couple why it is that this one intimate act, prayer, would be off limits between a couple about to be married. There are all sorts of times when we are open and when we are closed. We are very adept at being open one moment and closed the next. We are watching something on television and this guy sounds really interesting and then he says some buzzword that happens to belong to the opposite political party that you're from. Oh, that's it, that guy's an idiot. Close off. We open and we close. Are there places, I wonder, that we think are too intimate to share with God? If there's a place where God isn't allowed in your life, then what does that mean? Does it mean that we don't need God there? When we close off God because we're not quite ready for that aspect of our life to go prime time, what does that say? Isn't that the place that probably needs God the most? Now, Jesus in today's gospel does a couple of shocking things. But for a lot of us, I think it's the idea that Jesus as the ear, nose, and throat doctor seems very hands-on. He sticks his fingers in the guy's ear who's having the hearing problem. Again, he sticks his finger right in the guy's ears. Now, I imagine the forerunners of the Episcopalians amongst his disciples saying, Jesus, now that's rather unseemly. You wouldn't stick your fingers in his ear. You just a paragraph earlier sent a demon out of a child who wasn't even in the room, but you got to stick your fingers in this guy's ear and touch his tongue? Come on now. It reminds me of the story of the preacher in a church that did a lot of those hands-on healings, sort of the televangelist kind of thing, and a long line of people coming up, and he would roughly put his hands on them, and he would pray very loudly and very longly. At one point, he was looking for the next person. Someone come up, and please come and let me pray for you, healing something that's going wrong in your life. And finally, he got a guy from the back to sort of sheepishly come out. And he walked up to the front. And he says, tell me, friend, what is it that you are worried about? What needs prayer in your life? And the guy said, well, I'm really worried about my hearing. And the preacher, thinking of this very gospel, gets his fingers ready. And he sticks them in the guy's ear. And he's praying loudly, and he's moving those fingers around in there. And he's praying, and he's praying. And after a long prayer, he whips the fingers out and said, there, my friend, how is your hearing now? And the fellow says, actually, my hearing's not until Tuesday. Clergy need to be humble, of course. We need to be reminded of this. But it's that physicality of that act that just drives us so crazy. The idea that you would stick your fingers in anybody's ears. That ear thing makes us uncomfortable. It's like foot washing. You tell a bunch of Episcopalians we're going to have a foot washing, all of a sudden people move further to the back. If I just pointed, all right, you are going to have your feet washed. Whoa, I don't think so, not feet. And those of you who do agree, half of you get pedicures to prepare yourselves for it. What is it about us that is so closed off? Garrison Keillor, for those of you who are NPR fans, has a whole essay about what it means to be an Episcopalian. He says this: "We make fun of Episcopalians for their blandness, their excessive calm, their fear of giving offense, their lack of speed, and also for their secret fondness of macaroni and cheese. But nobody sings like them. If you were to ask an audience in Des Moines, a relatively Episcopalianless place, to sing along on the chorus of Michael Row the Boat Ashore, they would look daggers at you as if you had asked them to strip to their underwear. But if you do this among Episcopalians, they'll smile and row that boat ashore and up on the beach and down the road. Many Episcopalians are bred from childhood to sing in four-part harmony, a talent that comes from sitting on the lap of someone singing alto or tenor or bass and hearing the harmonic intervals by putting your little head against that person's ribcage. It's natural for Episcopalians to sing harmony. We're too modest to be soloists, too worldly to sing in unison. I do believe this, people. Episcopalians who love to sing in four-part harmony are the sort of people you could call up when you're in deep distress. If you are dying, they will comfort you. If you are lonely, they'll talk to you. And if you're hungry, they'll give you a tuna salad. Episcopalians believe in prayer but would practically die if asked to pray out loud. And he goes on. But what is it about us that makes us so hesitant in these areas that just seem unseemly? We have, at the beginning of the gospel reading, this woman who comes in front of Jesus, even though she is not the sort of person who would usually be welcomed in that context. And she didn't cower before Jesus. The question that often comes up is, was it faith or was it desperation to heal her child that gave her that strength? I'm not sure there's a difference. We need what Jesus has to offer. We need the healing in our lives. And faith and desperation sound an awful lot alike if we're really honest with ourselves. That sort of raw sense of Jesus being there, being physical with the ears of the guy, that is how Jesus comes to us. That incarnation really means in the flesh, carne, flesh. Bono from U2 once remarked about the Christmas scene, and he said, the very fact that Jesus comes to us in the dirt and the muck, he didn't say that, but this is church and I have to be careful. The fact that Jesus comes to us in the dirt, muck, and the straw brings me to my knees, literally. Local author Diana Butler Bass made an observation at a conference I went to that really just struck her. She had seen, like we have, images of Jesus all over the place, in paintings, in sculptures, and in a lot of churches, corpus, the body hanging on the cross. And she was taken aback by something she had never noticed before. Why, she wondered, is Jesus always hairless, body hair-wise? It's kind of an odd thing. I mean, we've got Jesus hanging on a cross with blood and gore and everything, but body hair is just a little bit too earthly for us. Somehow that makes it a little bit too real. The guy was a Middle Eastern, for goodness sake. He probably would have been pretty hairy, but not in our depictions of him. Why is that too close? Why is that too physical for us, too earthly? When I was myself a seminarian, I was at St. John's in the Village in Manhattan, a place that during the very early years of the AIDS crisis, before they even had the name AIDS for it, people were worried about catching AIDS from shaking hands, from sitting on a bus seat. They didn't know how to catch it. And in the midst of that, this church said, no, we're going to take a cue from this Jesus character. We're going to be on hands-on, laying on of hands, sacrament, and spreading the oil is going to be our main thing. We are going to be about the sacrament of unction. We're going to lay hands on people who are sick. And they became known for it. They even changed around some of the architecture in their space so that the healing oils were really obvious, saying, this is what we do. We're going to be touching people who are unclean. And we want Jesus to go there. We want the church to go there and be in those places. Why is it then that we don't want Jesus to go other places, too personal and too close to home, just as physical, just as dangerous? In this story, after he sticks his fingers in the guy's ears, he says, Ephatha. It's Aramaic. We have about a dozen different words and phrases from Aramaic in our Gospels. It's the common language of the people. They had lost Hebrew for a variety of reasons. That's another sermon. But the Hebrew had eventually gotten to the point where it was Aramaic, as derivations came through. It would have been the language Jesus would have grown up using in the home, very personal. And when he uses it this handful of times, it's always a moment of power. Talitha kum, he says to the young girl, little girl, get up, be raised. Probably the most familiar to us is during the Passion play, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus says from the cross, quoting the Psalms. Here we have Ephatha, be opened. It's personal for him, it's the language of his people, and it's powerful. What area of your life is closed off? How might you be blocked up? Like this fellow whose ears weren't working, whose tongue wasn't working, he was bottled up. How are you bottled up? Where are you blocked off? Jesus comes in unexpected ways, perhaps uncomfortable ways, but that's how he breaks through. Ephatha, be opened. Not be open, but be opened. Not be open, which might be something I do of my own accord, where I can close off just as quickly when something brushes a little too close by me. But be opened, acted upon by one who's coming so close, perhaps too close for comfort. Not be open for something to come, but be opened for something that is here and now in the flesh, in the dirt, muck, and straw, in the uncomfortable places that need comfort, in all of the dark places where we so desperately need them. It's awkward. It's vulnerable. But it's vulnerable to the grace and healing of God, and it's intimate. God comes to us to be that close. Ephatha, be opened.